Welcome back to TechRadar. I am Deputy Editor John McCann, and with me is Matt Swider, our Managing Editor, and he's been reviewing the much anticipated Note 20 Ultra. So we're here right now to chat to you live all about the phone. That's right, we are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube, we may be live on Instagram, and we're live on TechRadar.com. So if you're here, welcome, and make sure you drop your comments in the chat. You've got any questions about the phone? Whack them in there. We have video producer Matt Phillips with us as well, who's going to be in the chat with you, getting down and dirty with the comments, collecting up all your questions. And towards the end of this feed, we will try and answer as many as possible and give you all a little shout out, because isn't that nice? If you're watching this on demand, then you missed out. You could have been here with us live. We could have answered your questions, but fear not, there's still plenty of good stuff in this video. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Facebook so you don't miss out on our next live video. That is all the housekeeping out the way, thank goodness. Now let's get on to what you're all here for. Matt Swider, tell us more about the Note 20 Ultra.
Yeah, the Note 20 Ultra comes with this S Pen, and this is what it looks like. Wait, no, that's way older. That's there it is.
That looks better.
A little more updated, a little more modern. But it does, you can write on it, and nice. Like all the other notes, but it's super powerful. Our review is live on TechRadar.com. And the thing I liked the most about testing this, we've gotten like 2 weeks with this phone, is the camera. It has a triple lens rear camera on it, and the zoom level is 5 times optical, 50 times digital, which, I mean, I have my iPhone here and that does 2 times optical and like 10 times digital. So the photos on the Note 20 Ultra are really spectacular at any zoom level almost.
So obviously S Pen and camera, two the big features on this big phone. But let's break it down a bit. Let's start off with the design. What are we looking at here? Obviously a huge device.
Yeah, I like it better than the S20 phones. It's a little less reflective on the back. It has, so
here is an S20.
S20 Plus right there. Good phone, and probably better than the S20 Ultra. We'll get into that in a minute. But this version has this just copper colored Mystic, help me out with the name, Mystic
Bronze
so that they went with, and they also have the Mystic White and the Mystic Black. In a previous version of a draft of our review, I said that's for people who just hate life or something like that. It got edited out, but like this is the exciting color, and it just has this frosted texture to it. This is glass on the back. On the regular S20, the smaller version, 6.7 instead of a 6.9 inch screen, it is not actually glass. They may try to feel like glass, but it doesn't. So my recommendation, and throughout this review, I keep telling people, if you're going to spend over £1,000 or 800 plus quid on a phone, get this version. It's a little more expensive, but it's worth it, especially if you're going to hang on to it for a while. So this one, the design is it is a big phone, and like a lot of the phones are big. The 6.9 inch Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, I have that version somewhere, also has a 6.9 inch screen. So what defines a Note in terms of design is no longer it's big. It is still big, but it's no longer exclusively big. It's really the S Pen that defines the Note these days.
And I'm currently using the Pixel 4a, which probably couldn't be further away in terms of size. How is it to handle? Can you still use it relatively easily? Is it tricky?
Yeah, I'm used to bigger phones these days just by nature of my job. But I do feel like, I like to say, I feel like I'm on vacation when I have a smaller phone in my hand. And that's why I'm really excited about not wearables, about foldables, the other ables phone mobile category. And that's why I like, having a phone you can close up. And I think that's the future of phones. But yeah, it's big. And you do get used to it. But I recommend a case, and we should have a page on TechRadar, if not already, very soon, about best Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra cases, because this has almost fallen out of my hands at least once, but I didn't have any scratch marks on it, which was good. But yeah, the problem with getting phones so early to test out is sometimes the cases aren't available for you to test out right away. So I think an avalanche of cases are probably headed my way from different manufacturers. Great. So be it. That always happens. But yeah, it is big. It's. I feel like I'm gonna be relaxed going back to a smaller phone in some ways, but I would miss a lot of the features here, especially the camera, if I did give up this phone and go back to like an iPhone SE 2020 or that Google Pixel 4a. So.
And obviously, the main thing that makes this phone so big is that 6.9 display.
Yep.
What's it like? Is it any good?
Yeah. So one thing that people will pick on with this phone, and something that actually doesn't quite matter. I hate seeing the reviews that go live. Our review went live today. I see other reviews, but sometimes people pick on things like it has 120 hertz screen refresh rate, which is great. And that's much better than the 60 hertz that's on the iPhone, and it just makes your screen move a little bit more quickly. Your movies look a little bit better. Your games definitely look better. Even scrolling different applications, depending on the phone, with a faster screen refresh rate, you'll notice that going through your Instagram feed will be just a little less jarring. Because the screen refresh rate is a little bit faster. This has an adaptive screen refresh rate, so if you're looking at an email, it's not burning through with a 120 hertz screen refresh rate. So definitely looks better, but the thing it can't do is the maximum resolution at 120 hertz. So Quad HD, technically W Quad HD Plus because of the sizing, is the maximum resolution, and you can't have that enabled, and it'll drop back down to the normal 60 hertz. Most people can't see the difference between the Quad HD and the 1080p, which is what this phone is right now and what it is by default. So I would say it really doesn't matter. I would rather have the faster screen refresh rate. So, and you might not notice 120 hertz right away, but when you go back to 60 hertz, that's when you can notice the difference. So that's the keeper. There are phones out there that do 120 hertz and Quad HD at the same time, but it's not that big of a deal. But reviewers pick on it because it's something that they like to say. I say it in my review, but at the same time, I don't think it's that big of a deal in the end. It's not a deal breaker, even for a very expensive phone.
Cool. So moving on from the display, and let's have a focus on those cameras, which you spoke about in the intro.
Or the Google Pixel 4. But it's very, very close. In some situations, it's better. I think it's very subjective, though. But the ultra wide's great. It's you get like this 120 field of view, 120 degree field of view. I really like that because if you're in front of like a monument or something where you want to take a picture, but you can't get the whole building in, instead of cutting off the top and bottom, you get that whole field of view. You kind of tell more of a story. So cameras are great on the back. And I would say I had, even if if you do something like pixel peaking and try to compare it against all of the other phones, and you notice, oh, this one's better than the other one. That's a marginal difference, but for me, it's the interface that I like. And so I really like being able to flip the selfie camera and the rear camera by just swiping on the screen. And that's a really cool feature. Double tapping the power button to launch the camera app. That's really handy. And just the interface, I would say, is really good. They also have these live focus filters on the Note 20 Ultra and all recent flagship Samsung phones. And there's a color point mode that kind of puts you in color or the subject in color, but the background in black and white. So I've had a blast, trying out this phone. One last camera feature I'll tell you about is the S Pen can take remote selfies. So that's a really cool thing. And like to be able to, set this up, prop this phone up somewhere and take remote selfies. It also can do regular photos from the rear cameras. that's something that you don't see on a lot of phones because there's no remote. You can kind of do that on an Apple Watch or the Samsung Galaxy Watch with a traditional Samsung phone. But that is something that I kind of appreciated because you could do it without very little setup. So definitely the most fun I've had with a camera phone in 2020.
And Samsung have improved their night mode a bit here.
Yeah, the night mode does seem to be improved. I think it's more of a software tweak, and they're adjusting things in the software rather than to be dramatic hardware. If you are coming from the Note 10 Plus, then you'll notice some hardware differences. So there's the two most recent high-end Note phones, the Note 10 Plus from last year and the Note 20 Ultra. There is no Note 20 Plus this year. There's only a regular Note 20. But definitely some better night shots, but there is still skin smoothing both in daytime and very apparent at nighttime. You look maybe 10 years younger. Some people might love that. And but I'm just like, it doesn't work in all situations. There's also, it amps up the vibrancy. So the grass is greener in landscape shots. Flowers will be more red if they're red. That's all well and good, but you do have the issue where, say you have like a little bit of like a sunburn, or like your skin exhibits a little bit of redness. All of a sudden, it looks like you have the worst sunburn ever. Like it like hot dogs are my favorite example. It's like, is that hot dog nuclear? Like, did you spread ketchup all over that? And it's like, oh, that's Samsung doing its Samsung thing with the camera phone. So it's good in a lot of cases, and it Instagramifies the phone out of the box, or your photo out of the box. But it doesn't always work out in every situation. So it's very subjective. Some people love it. Some people run into problems.
So overall, strong cameras.
Love the camera.
But with some small nuances.
Yeah, and like that's why we gave it a 4.5 out of 5 on our TechRadar review, because it's not perfect, and you will notice some things on the phone that you're like, I wish the front camera, while good, didn't do that skin smoothing. So that's one thing I noticed. Not a deal breaker by any means, but it's something that you should go in knowing before you spend. In the US, it's $12.99 for a phone. Like, that's at the base model. We have 128 gigabytes of storage. That's probably stealing your next question. And the UK has 256 gigabytes of storage. There's also a 512 gigabyte storage model. But all of these Ultra phones have a micro SD card slot for expandable storage. So you're kind of not stuck, but it's a lot of money to spend on a phone, especially the US version, the base model that has 128 gigabytes installed on it.
Excellent. That's the camera. Let's move on to the next big Note feature, and that is the S Pen.
Yes. So the S Pen, there's a couple new gesture features. There's lower latency on the S Pen, but the thing I like the most, and I'll open it up here, press the in-screen fingerprint sensor, but Samsung Notes. So I've been very critical of Samsung Notes. I feel like last year and in the past 2 years, because I keep mentioning various issues with Note phones and they never correct it, I feel like they really have read my reviews over the last 2-3 years and came up with software ideas to correct that. So this is one of the features I've talked about before, but you can record audio with your Note. So I will record voice recordings, right? So I can hit voice recordings and then talk about, so we're talking about we talked about the camera. So I'm going to chat about the camera and how it has a 108 megapixel sensor. So 108 megapixels. And then I'm going to talk about the design again, just for a second, and talk about the design and how it has this frosted glass, and that's really cool. And then I'm going to talk about the S Pen, and and I'm going to show you this neat new feature with the S Pen. So I'm going to hit stop on that, and then this is a live demonstration here. Anything can go wrong. Hopefully it works. So I'm going to tap where I talked about the camera. There we go. And then hit the camera where I typed with the camera. All right, so there it is. So if I turn up the volume, now it has a 108 megapixel sensor. So that's where I talk about the camera. I want to drop down to where I talked about the S Pen. And that's where I talked about the S Pen. So journalists and students will love this. And anybody who has to sit in a boring meeting and has to be lectured and then go back and type notes. The normal thing that people deal with is a timeline, and they're like, "Oh, I recorded some audio. I have to find out where someone talked about X, Y, and Z." This is an interactive timeline, and it's synced with what you scribble down when you scribble it down. And it's just mind blowing how great that's going to be for students and anybody else who has to listen to long lectures. I know I'm going to use this feature personally when I go to like a briefing about a phone or a press conference or some sort of event where you're taking long notes and you have audio. Kind of brings those two together. The Tab S7 and the Tab S7 Plus also have this feature with their stylus. So that's a really cool thing that Samsung has pounced on. I feel like Apple should do that with their Apple Pencil, but we'll see if they ever get around to that.
It's interesting because live transcriptions are sort of the popular thing in the last sort of 12 months for smartphones. You've got Google offering its live transcribing feature on the Pixel handsets, which doesn't need the internet and will just transcribe live into text as people speak, which is really impressive. Before that came about, I was using Otter AI app, which is a free app. There is paid for levels if you want to provide yourself with more storage and whatnot, but that's really good as well for offering live transcription. That does need an internet connection, but again, all these live transcription tools, as you say, great for business, great for students, great for learning. So yeah, some real good productivity features. And I guess the other aspect of the S Pen, and maybe one that myself and yourself are maybe not quite enough skilled for, is the actual drawing ability. If you are graphically driven, then actually the S Pen provides a whole new use case for your smartphone. And we have peers in the industry who have done some quite fantastic artwork just using the S Pen and the Note 20 Ultra. And so if that is your bag, if you are very graphically minded, then there's not really many other options for you to pick from, but the Note 20 Ultra seems like a fantastic choice.
Yeah, the Motorola came out with the Moto G stylus a couple months ago. That's more like a budget phone, and I want to see more stylus phones at the budget level. Samsung came out with the Note 10 Lite earlier this year, which is very confusing because it was a month out from when they announced it from the S20 launch event. So it was like it was very confusing on why they came out with that naming, especially. But I want to see, like, my niece, who is like 13, would love to take remote selfies with a pen and do like all these pen magic tricks. And like I mentioned, the students, but no one that age wants to spend over $1,000 or $1,299 for a phone like this. So I think there's an opportunity for Samsung and other companies to get in on it. But when it comes to drawing and things like that, this is pretty much your only option for a phone. There's tablets that do it, and that's great. But it's definitely the best phone or with a stylus. But the competition is thin. But I said in my review, it's not undeserved. It does a lot of great things, and Samsung, to their credit, keeps pushing the envelope on the drawing aspects. So it's really great.
There you are. Excellent. Let's move on to another important aspect for any mobile phone buyer, and that's battery life. How does the Note 20 Ultra get on?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. And because we had the phone for so long, we got to test it out in the real world and do some lab tests as well. And first, our lab test didn't go as smoothly as we had expected, and that may have been because of a defective unit, so we swapped that out. And then it started getting normal numbers. And that is really important because I like to do, especially, take enough time to do in real world tests. And that is really just I have had about 20% left. So when our numbers in the lab started matching the numbers in real life, then I was more confident in the battery life. Now it has a 4,500 milliamp battery, so that's meaningless to a lot of people. But the S20 Ultra has a 5,000 milliamp battery, so they dialed it back a little bit. That's probably due to design more than anything. It's not a cost.
You've got to fit that S Pen in there somewhere, so I guess that takes up a chunk of space.
It does, and that's really something where, and that's probably my theory on why it's more squared off than a lot of other phones. There's a lot of phones with rounded corners, but yeah, also that's a reason why you have a little bit less battery life, because some battery would fit in there. But I really didn't notice that much of a reduction in the battery. It does have, in the US, it has the Snapdragon 865 Plus. I believe in the UK it's Exynos 990. And that's, we made out with the better chipset. In my mind, we got a small upgrade in the chipset in the US. But the battery life is definitely, I would say, all day plus. So, and I was going around taking photos of all those New York attractions, and I still had 20% left. So I was using it quite a bit. And I will say, it's definitely is a phone built for power users, and they can get through all the battery. Now, if you really try and you leave the screen on and you're playing games, like, you can kill this within a day and need to top it up before the end of the day. Something about, it's not necessarily battery life related, but the charging is fast. It has a 25-watt charger, so I have that somewhere plugged in because I was charging it. And the Note 10 Plus right here is compatible. It came with a 25-watt charger as well, but it was compatible with a 45-watt charger that was sold separately. This does not work with that. All three of the S20 phones from all different levels, from the S20, the S20 Plus, the S20 Ultra, were compatible with this 45-watt charger. Maybe Samsung didn't sell enough, but they axed that feature from this device, and I'm kind of curious as to why that is. But yeah, a little bit slower charging than it could be, but most people won't notice, and that's what the important thing when we judge a phone and do a phone review.
And it's interesting that you mentioned there's differences in chipset depending on where in the world you are. In North America, you get the Snapdragon 865 chipset, which is Qualcomm's flagship processor. Whereas in the UK and in Europe and in many other markets around the world, you're actually getting Samsung's own Exynos 990. And from reading reviews from both sides of the pond, we fondly call the Atlantic Ocean these days, there is, day to day, you're not really going to see a performance difference as a user of the Note 20. It's not. You're not going to be like, oh my God, this amp loads so much slower because I've got an Exynos in it. However, there seems to be sort of two areas where the Snapdragon North American model performs better than the rest of the world version. And the first one is battery life. It looks like the Snapdragon powered Note 20 Ultra just gives you a bit more life versus the Exynos one. So for those in the UK and Europe, your battery life experience may not be quite the same as Matt's in the US there, but you still should get a day out of it. We do have a unit in the UK running the Exynos chipset, so over the next week or so we will be providing more feedback on the battery life of that particular unit. And the second point of difference between them, by the sounds of it, is it sounds like the Exynos 990 phones just run a little hotter if you're doing something intensive such as gaming. Both phones and any phone will heat up, especially if you're playing PUBG, Call of Duty, Fortnite, anything like that. They get hot. These are intensive games, and these are fanless devices, so the heat is going to be generated. But again, it sounds like the Exynos chip runs a little hotter than the Snapdragon, so just small things just to consider, but we'll be able to provide a better side-by-side in the next week or so when we get the two handsets sort of doing dual tasks a bit more. Yeah,
we should do a temperature test, but be playing each other in the same game and see which one fares better.
That sounds great. Let us know in the comments below any other tests you'd like to see between those different model versions as well, and we'll get to them. Matt, before we hit into those all-important user questions, talk to us about release date and price. How much is this damn thing? Well, you've sort of told us already. It's a lot. And when can we get it?
Yeah, so the price is, well, I'll tell you when you can get it while I pull up that information. The release date is Friday, so it's this Friday. That is August 21st. So they announced it on August 5th. So we got it soon after that. So we've had quite a bit of time with this phone. But in the US, it's going to cost you a lot, at least for this Ultra version. So it is $12.99 for just the base model. So that's 128 gigabytes of internal storage. It does have micro SD, so you may be able to get away with that. But that base model in the UK is 1,179 pounds. In Australia, that is 1849. So Australian dollars. So that is, but that is for the 256 gigabyte version. So you're making out better in that respect. And I think 256 gigabytes is reasonable. That's not what I have on my iPhone. That is the, I still take all the video I need to take, all the pictures I need to take without a problem. 128, I may be reaching a problem at that point because of all the apps and all the photo history that I have on my devices. So all versions come with 12 gigabytes of storage, but the
12 gigabytes of RAM. 12 gigabytes
of RAM. And they all have micro SD card slots, except for the non-Ultra version. You're going to run into a problem with that. But the top end Note 20 Ultra has 512 gigabytes of internal storage. That's the version that you should get if money is no object to you. But that version costs $14.49 in the US and $12.79 in the UK. In Australia, that is 2,199 Australian dollars. If that is way too expensive for you, there's a 4G only version in Australia that you can get. In the US, we only have access to 5G versions, and so you're going to have to kind of figure out, what your carrier supplies and so forth. And a lot of it depends on what's rolled out in terms of infrastructure, 5G infrastructure. If Samsung says, okay, it's worth having a 4G version instead of a 5G version, or vice versa.
And if all of that is too much for you, there is the cheaper version in the Galaxy Note 20, the non-Ultra handset, which is slightly smaller, a smaller display, a more basic screen. Any other core differences between them? No micro SD card slot, and the fact that the back is called Glastic. That's a very scientific term that they made up in marketing, the scientists over there. But it doesn't quite feel the same, but it definitely has a glass look to it. The 60 hertz screen though, that's the deal breaker for a lot of people. And if you're going to spend this much money on a phone, you might as well go with the Ultra version. In the US, that would be $300 more, but usually in the US, you're spacing that over the course of 2 years. So it's not that much for a much better phone. And if you are concerned about price and you don't really need the stylus, well, then I would suggest going with the S20 Ultra, which is cheaper and also has the 3 times max zoom. That's what the regular Note 20 has for the optical zoom. So, go with one or the other. Don't go with the middle one, basically. The dial back down to the S20, or get the Note 20 Ultra. The Note 20 is good, but I think you can do better. We will have a full review of the Note 20 soon, so do keep your eye on TechRadar for more on that. But right, thank you very much. If you're still with us and you've gone through that, we hope you enjoyed it. Now it's time to bring you all in. Your comments, your questions. Matt Phillips, what have people been asking?
Hello. Yes, I am here as well. I've been here the whole time. First off, if you are in the chat, thank you so much for sticking around and sticking through this. There's lots of people chatting in the chat. Not all that many questions, to be honest with you, but we got a fair few from Instagram, so we'll go through them in a second. And also, apologies, we've had a couple of connection issues today, but hopefully at least the audio quality has been good for you. If the video quality hasn't been top notch, I apologize. We're working from home during a global pandemic. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? So, first off then, Swider, I've got some quick fire versus questions for you. If you were going to pick one of these phones, which would it be? Would you go for the Note 20 Ultra or the iPhone 11 Pro Max?
Oh, I mean, like I'm kind of tied to, especially in the US, tied to the iPhone and that ecosystem. So that's hard habit for me to break. But the more exciting phone is the Note 20 Ultra. It has a better camera. It has this curved display, and it has a faster refresh rate. Like every box is checked, and it's checked on the Samsung side. If it wasn't for iMessage, which we're all addicted to in the US, I would definitely be choosing this. So I carry around both, but that's part of my job. I don't expect most people to do that. But it really depends, I would say, on your friends' network. If your friends have iPhones and you can do AirDrop with them, and you have, you're addicted to those features, the iPhone's good, but this is by and large the better phone. Now, I will say the iPhone 12 is probably coming out in September, October. We may see that stuff, so that my answer could change. But for now, this Samsung's really nice.
Fair enough. And then from you and Christy on Instagram as well, Mi 10 Ultra versus the Note 20 Ultra. I'm not even sure the Mi 10 Ultra is available in the US, is it?
It is not.
So that's an easy one for you, but maybe in more general terms.
Yeah. So that's another Ultra phone. It is the rise of the Ultra phones. I don't know much about Mi phones because they're not available here. But Xiaomi is, a brand that's really popular. John, do you know much about the Mi 10 Ultra?
So there are various similarities between these two phones, but the Mi 10 Ultra is going to be a more affordable option for you. You only get a 1080p display, whereas the Samsung offers QHD, but as Matt said earlier in this video, only QHD if you opt for 60 hertz refresh rate. If you want 120 hertz, you have to dial the Note back down to 1080p. Similar size screen, although the Mi 10 Ultra is 6.67, so it's touch smaller there. There's still a bunch of cameras on the back. Again, there's 4 cameras on the back of that, but having some high spec sensors is only part of the parcel when it comes to smartphones. Another key component is how they're integrated with the software and how the ISP works and what the software and the phone does in terms of processing those images. Samsung, for example, it really likes to boost the colors in its images, so they're really quite visually arresting. They catch your eye when they're on screen, especially on mobile screens. That's what they're designed for, to look great on mobile, to look great on social, and thus to be shared. Whereas other handsets maybe capture more true to life colors and images, giving you a more realistic of what your eye sees. I can't comment on the particular integration of the Mi 10 Ultra, but it's worth bearing in mind that Samsung has a long heritage in smartphone cameras. So it's managed to refine its processes over the years to really enhance the images that its devices take. In contrasting measures, Xiaomi is newer on the market. Its software is good, but it may not quite be as slick as Samsung's offering. So the way it handles those images and processes them will be slightly different and will produce slightly different results. And thus, if you look at the images side by side, there will be a difference in them. And it comes down to personal choice as to which variation you use. So I'd say it's not a battery life stalwart. It's not going to last you 2 days. So I'd say overall, the differences in battery life are going to be quite minimal. It's worth noting that the Galaxy Note has 12 gig of RAM versus the Sony, which has 8 gig. So while the Sony has a potentially better chipset, it has less RAM. So in terms of performance, that may well balance it out more against the European version of the Note. And again, as I said, there's probably going to be little performance difference in there and maybe slightly different battery life as well. But it all depends on what you're doing with on your phone as well. If you're going to be watching a lot of Netflix, obviously the Sony is great for that as well. It's got a 21:9 display. It's got HDR. It's 4K potentially. Is that, am I right?
I think it is right.
Yeah.
It's 4K as well. So